Right, welcome back to another episode of Oddie's Angling TV, and I've got Ross here. Ross is a well-known carp man in Cork, and behind us is one of the most famous carp lakes in the country. It's the Lough. Now, some people will think this is a nice lake, some people will think it's not so nice because of the fact that it's smack bang in the middle of a housing estate. You're going to have people walking in front of the camera. This is a pathway around the lake. There's wildlife and birds out there to beat the band, and usually they're feeding the birds and stuff, so it's a bit of an interesting place. But this lake is where the Irish record carp was caught, and that was caught in what year? Do you remember?
I can just about remember it.
Roughly.
I think it was 98, wasn't it? Was it 98?
98. That sounds about right. And that was
right,
caught by Sidney Kennedy at £29.13.
13, yeah, 29, 13.
Now, it's funny, I actually caught that fish around 92, 93. It was in March, and I caught it at £19.7, and it was a football then. It was this grotesquely misshapen fish, and if you hit it with a pin, it would have just burst. Yeah. And it went on to get even more grotesque in its shape.
Grew in shape.
Yeah, wasn't the prettiest of fish, was it?
No, not at all.
So, give us a rundown of the history of this lake. So, what is this lake? Where did it come from? And keep it short.
It's I suppose the Cork Lough has one of the most illustrious histories of any lake, especially given that it's in the middle of a city. I suppose back in the early 1900s, it was largely open countryside, you know, and it was effectively marsh. The island was divided in two. There was a large channel. It was a lot deeper than it is now, and didn't have any carp, of course. In the early days, it was predominantly eel, and they were actually used as a food fish. You know, we know that, and what would be known as thornines, which is sticklebacks.
And so, when did it actually get developed into what we see here with the pathways? And that was in the 50s or 40s.
I suppose really everyone talks about, you know, the 50s as a kind of a milestone. I suppose. Perhaps even later than that. I'm not exactly sure the first date when the actual path and the wall went in, but certainly it was around that stage when the fishery itself changed a lot because of the introduction of carp, which were introduced to as a mechanism to reduce the weed.
Now, where did these fish come from?
That's a very good question. Well, we think that the fish, obviously originally came from the UK, but there's been, I suppose, there's been a lot of debate on their precise origin. But we do know that they're of the Leamy strain of carp.
Right, the John Lenny strain, right? Yeah, exactly. And they then were stocked in from a lake that's up in Kilsheelan, a small pond, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, is that?
Yeah, Kilsheelan Pond basically was where they originated, and
these were then put in here at hand size and grew up to be the record fish of £29.
Exactly.
And at one stage there was probably the guts of maybe, I don't know, half a dozen 20s in here, was there?
There was more than that. I mean, back, I suppose, at its peak, there was at least 20s, you know, in the water. And it's, I suppose, over the years, the fish died off and the populations changed and the whole dynamic changed. But if we take it back, you know, at the start, there was over 100, you know, palm-sized fish introduced into the lake. I suppose after 20 years, a lot of the weeds disappeared, which was a weed called ringed hornwort, which is rather localized, and that had with it associated stickleback. Then once the weed disappeared, the stickleback disappeared, and then the carp effectively took over the lake, and it became a specimen fishery. You know?
Yeah, and as I say, it's an odd place to fish because, as I say, you're fishing on a path. You're effectively it's a park, and it's full of people. I mean, like, we were fishing last night. Now I have to say, it's the 2nd of February today. Is it the 2nd?
It is.
I think it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I mean, it's winter. And it should be really cold. It's actually blazing sunshine here today. It's actually really warm. I'd say in the heat here, it's definitely double figures in the heat, but the water is still freezing. We've got real high pressure today. 2 days ago we had low pressure, and there's a couple of guys down the bank and they were catching very well. I think they had about 12 carp between them, up to £16. The biomass has changed over the last few years in this lake. There was a big fish kill here, wasn't there?
Yeah, effectively, what happened was in the early 2000s, we had a big change, because there was I suppose the introduction of fry, because the loch fish didn't breed. You know, it was very sporadically.
I was going to say they did actually breed, because we did actually catch a few small ones.
But it was the sort of thing that there was, I suppose, you have breeding and recruitment, and you know, fish can breed, but the fry might not necessarily survive into adults. And I suppose that was the thing. We weren't getting you know, evidence of, you know, a lot of survival of these younger fish coming through. So the theory at the time was, if small fish get introduced, you know, from obviously the decoy estate, there would be a chance that these would grow into big fish and replace the big fish which were dying off systematically. But what happened was, around 2002, 2003, there was large fish kills of the original stock, known as, you know, these Lenny fish, and basically after those fish died off, we were very worried that we wouldn't have any fish to fish for. So then there was this, I suppose, this massive change in the lake, whereby these small fish started to grow, and we didn't expect them to survive and grow to what they did.
So what's the biomass in here now like? I mean, we're talking.
It's incredibly high. We've I suppose there have been estimates of up to 500 kgs in an acre as an upper estimate, which is massive. I mean,
which isn't really optimum growth levels, is it?
No,
I mean, we should really be around 100 mark to get optimum growth.
We should be 100, and even less. Some people would say 50 kgs an acre for if you really want fast growth. But now, at 500 kgs.
Now, in fairness,
even
though,
if it was half that, it's
at the end of the day, though, I mean, having fast growth is one thing, but you also have to have the gene strain here to do that. And in fairness, the decoy strain is a very diluted strain of interbreeding for the last 100 years. Yeah. So it's not really going to rocket that much more than £20.
No, for sure. I mean, the thing is about the decoy fish is, I suppose, they would be the equivalent of what you might consider feral. You know, if you look at other countries like Australia and the States, if the carp that do well in the wild and multiply, which the decoy fish seem to be able to do, would be considered somewhat feral, and they'd be characteristically leaner, meaner fish. You know, not I suppose the opposite would be domesticated. As we know, we do have domesticated strains now in Ireland, which would be the French strain and the English, which from Neilhardy aquatica, which can grow much faster in a shorter period of time. They've been selected over generations for growth, and we know that they can do big weights. So effectively there's been a bit of a transition. There's more of a demand for these faster growing carp for specimen fisheries, and those fish would certainly grow a lot faster than the decoy, as we have shown from, you know, research in growth rate experiments. We've tested the three strains together under controlled conditions, and the French and the English strain certainly grow faster.
So going back to the biomass of fishing here, we've got fish. There's a huge head of small £1 to £3 fish. Yeah. And then you also have a lot of backup sort of 8s to 12 pounders, and then there's a good head of 15, 16, 17 pounders. Now some of the lads are telling me there are a handful of fish that touch over the £20 mark. And these are all the old decoy fish, so that's pretty much their peak weights. They're not going to really get much bigger. I mean, the chance of this place doing a record now is slim, isn't it?
It's very slim. Yeah, basically, I suppose the structure of the stock, we've been kind of monitoring it using using fly tags, and we've been able to figure out that there's good early growth in the lake, which happens with a lot of lakes, because basically what happens with carp, maybe most people don't know this, but especially not from a scientific background, is that carp start off like most small fish and fry feeding on zooplankton, but they change from feeding pelagically on zooplankton to feeding on the bottom and taking other prey, such as, I suppose, chironomids, as we know as bloodworm, and the ligochetes, or sort of freshwater worms and so forth. So they'll feed on that, and basically once they go into that transition and they start feeding less on the zooplankton and more on the bottom, what you find is, especially when they reach, I suppose, maturity at 3 and 4 plus, which is 3 years and 4 years, they need more and more food to actually gain that extra weight, so their energy requirements keep going up. So what happens is, when all of those smaller fish reach that critical weight, there's a lot more competition. As we know, we have smaller fish and bigger fish, so as these smaller fish keep creeping up and up and up, and they meet, I suppose, the larger fish at these intermediate sizes, you have a lot of competition, and then all of the growth in the lake effectively levels off, because there's only so much food. It's
And this is a rich lake, though, isn't it?
This is a very rich lake. I mean, the Lough is on limestone. I mean, we all know of there's a saying like fat calves, fat trout. It's like if you're on the river shore, you're on limestone, you've big trout and you've big cattle. It's the same with fish. If you have limestone, you generally can have very good growth in fish. Because you've a relatively high pH. Your water is rich, and especially. The unique thing about the Lough is, as you pointed out earlier, Jerry, is the temperatures are very warm down in the south of Ireland. We've a good maritime influence from the sea, and we have quite warm temperatures the year round. And also, in addition to that, we have obviously the limestone, and yet again on top of that, we have a third element which has been characteristically used to improve productivity of fisheries. This is nutrients, and the Lough is nutrient rich, and when you have nutrient rich water, you have high productivity. So we have shallow, we have limestone, we have temperature, and we have nutrients, and all of those together,
which, as you say, is a cooking pot for success.
Cooking pot for success.
For carp.
If you look at any fish farmer, what do? They lime their lake. They add nutrients, and they're generally shallow. So
now, I'm sure a lot of people watching are going, now this Ross fella, he seems to know his stuff. How does he know so much? Well, you're an ecologist, or a freshwater ecologist.
I am, that's my profession.
And you've done a PhD on carp. And
I'm still in progress.
All right, sorry, my mistake. But I mean, I have to tell you, this guy, what he doesn't know is not worth knowing. I mean, we've been picking his brains this morning before we set up the cameras, and I have to say, it's an absolute minefield of information. So, going back to the future of this lake, where do you see? I mean, do you see yourselves collectively removing some of the stock to make it a better fishery, or?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's like anything. There's a lot of politics associated with management of a fishery, because, as you know yourself, is that with any fishery, there's always differences in opinion. However, if you look at it from a purely, I suppose, best practice point of view, if you reduce the stock, your fish stock is more healthy, because it allows space for other fish to grow. But
who's going to move these fish? Because the fisheries board aren't allowed here, are they? Are they?
No, the fisheries board would in agreement with the Cork City Council.
Yeah, they just couldn't rack up and start netting.
No.
Because they did that before, and it wasn't too successful for them. With a number of their scientists being called liars in the Dáil.
I can't comment on that part.
That's all right, I just did.
Myself personally, because I'm not aware of that, but as I would say is, the council would oversee what happens on the Lough, and then basically Inland Fisheries Ireland would be, I suppose, as the fisheries board, would be the people who would officially sign off on any movements or nettings of fish. And
what's the health of the fish like here? Have they got a good clean bill of health here? Because I know the Marine Institute have looked into. I mean, there is fish health testing currently going on, and that program, as far as I know, is coming to an end, and it's looking good so far. Because I know, say like Maynooth, which we did a video on Maynooth recently, and they've had. They've been thoroughly tested over the last while, and they just got their test results back, and they're completely free of koi herpes. They're completely free of SVC and any other nasty problems that carp waters tend to suffer with, especially in the UK. So we're good here, are we? That
it
you know of?
Seems to be, as I know so far.
Because there was a little rumour of koi herpes in here.
There was, and of course, like it just everything needs to be seen through, you know, and I suppose you need a proper testing program which has been undertaken, and we haven't had any fish kills since the early 2000s. So,
which was attributed to something completely different.
Different. We were, you know, it was a Argillus lice, you know, because all of the fish had a heavy burden of Argillus lice, and there are fisheries all over Ireland that do suffer, including rainbow trout fisheries that do suffer from Argillus. But now the fishery seems to have a very clean bill of health, and we hope that it will continue to do so. And in addition to that, we've of course, to increase biosecurity, we've installed fish bins, you know, which are, as you'll see around the lake, they were done in agreement with the Cork Carp.
And these are for dipping nets and stuff?
Yeah, so basically, effectively, we came up with a plan. We said we want to ensure that we maintain a good health fishery, so when anglers arrive, they can get access to these bins. There's disinfectant on one side, water on the other. You dip your keep nets, your landing nets and sacks, and you dry them out, and it just means it's the good way forward for all fisheries should have them, you know.
So anybody who's fishing here, right, they should be aware that there was a thought that there could have been, after initial testing, there could have been koi herpes present in the lake, but that's not. It's
been proven that there was, you know, from extensive testing now, that there hasn't been any evidence of a fully blood virus in the lake.
So, but the reason why I'm keeping at this point is I think it's really important that if anybody does fish here on this lake, you know, dip your nets before when you arrive, if the tanks are open and you can get them open. Apparently there's a key across the way from the back of us over on the main road in the pet store. If it's open, you can nip over and get that. But when you do leave here, make sure that your nets are dry. Every mat, every net, every piece of stuff that has hit the water or had a fish in it, make sure you dry it out 100% in UVA light, because that will kill off absolutely everything better than any dip tank. So it's just an important thing that if you do fish here on this lake, make sure that when you go to another water, anything that you're bringing is still not wet from this trip. Make sure it's dried out properly in UV light, and that should negate any cross-contamination.
And I think it's something that people should do with all waters as
I
well,
agree,
you know?
totally, but
it's something that we kind of forget about, but it's very important now. I mean, we all know the scares of zebra mussels and Asian clam and all of these, what they call invasive species that come in. And I think, especially people coming from abroad and moving from the Shannon, where there seems to be a lot of these animals after being introduced, I mean, it's very important that you clean, not only actually cleaning down your equipment, but actually drying it out. That's actually very important, because, you know, drying out is a critical step if you can.
It's the biggest thing that you'll do to save fish's lives elsewhere.
Exactly.
Well, look, this is the end of the vid. Thanks to Ross for sitting in and having a chat with us. This guy could prattle on for hours and hours, and it's dead interesting stuff as well, but look, we won't subject you to that today.
Thanks, Jerry.
You're most welcome, but thanks again, Ross.
Yeah, no problem.
If you ever see him on the lock here, pick his brains, because the guy is an encyclopedia of knowledge.
Right, so Ross, talking to Jerry there a little while ago, you were talking about the origins of the original stocking here in the loch.
Yeah.
As soon as I heard Leany, right? Alarm bells, right? Obviously, Leany's very famous for various introductions, especially in the UK.
Right,
There was another water here in Ireland. You mentioned Kilchina. There was another water called Rainella, which had Leany's strain as well. Yeah, now, when we're talking about Leany's strain, are we talking about the same Galician strain that were put into places like Redmire?
Yeah, it's the same. It's the very same strain. I mean, they're probably the most notorious fish strain of carp anyway in the UK and Ireland, for sure, dating back to Redmire. And it's very interesting that they would end up in Ireland, but it's actually, you know, very much the truth, you know, as far as we know. I mean, we have undertaken genetic studies. Bill Brazier, he's done a genetic baseline of the Irish stocks. Unfortunately, we didn't get samples, too many samples from the original fish to relate them back to, I suppose, to the Leamy strain in the UK. But we do know that there is that distinct Leamy variety in Ireland, for sure, you know.
Excellent. Do we know, obviously, you know, you mentioned Kilcheelan Pond, where the loch stock came from, and there's Rainella, which a lot of people won't have heard of, but, you know, it's long since gone by the wayside.
Right up, yeah.
Were there any other Leany stockings in Ireland, as far as you know?
as far as I know, I'm unaware. I suppose the most recent, I suppose full record of stockings, I suppose, was undertaken by Bill again. He did a historical paper on the origins of all Irish fish, but as we know, as the two key places, as you pointed out, Rainella and Casheelan Pond. Casheelan Pond actually dried up, but it was refilled with water, I think, in the 80s, and I only visited it 2 years ago, and it's very much still exists. However, as far as we believe, there's no longer that Leany strain present in the lake, and it has actually been in fact replaced by decoy fish. So it's very interesting one, because that's the one thing about I suppose the history of Irish carp, and it's very much been one of one strain replaced by another, and that's essentially happens as new strains become available, and just as well as in mainland Europe and in the UK, as new strains become available, they are moved to different waters, and I suppose in the hope that there will be, I suppose, improved growth and so forth. And with it's a very sad story, I suppose, the story of those Leany fish, because obviously in the Lough, the original fish are virtually gone, apart from the exception of maybe a dozen fish in the lake, and also around Ireland. There's very little evidence that they may be left, so it's apart from obviously the extant stocks in the UK. So it's kind of I suppose a strain of fish that we kind of I suppose we grew up with in this lake, and we all would like again if they did breed and we did still have them, but unfortunately that's that'll be the way it is. They will probably inevitably go extinct in Ireland, which is the truth, So.
And of course, there's very few places, even in the UK, that still have a clean Leany strain. But
I mean, I suppose the big thing now is that I suppose with awareness about fish health, I mean. It's a big thing. Every country has problems with regards disease and so forth, and it has to be regulated. And for fish to be transferred now, all fisheries have to have a clean bill of health. It's under EU fish health legislation. So, if a fishery or a fish farm has a clean bill of health, the CFAS approved, it's possible for fish to be transferred once it's agreed with, say, the powers that be, such as the fisheries and, say, for example, the landowner, and a full agreement. So there's a lot of paperwork, but there may be an opportunity in the future to get that strain back, should we have a clean bill of health. As far as I know, there's only one fishery in the UK that currently has that CFAS approval, which is the Neil Hardy Aquatica. But in the future there may be more. But they again, they're a beautiful fish, and certainly one of the most picturesque strains there is. And I suppose people have that real affection for that, and that sense of wonder where I suppose. The home of carp fishing. I mean, you could think of Redmire as that, perhaps. So.
Well, my own email address has Redmire in it. That's how fondly I think of Redmire. It's so significant in the way I think about carp fishing. But something you mentioned earlier, which maybe I'm not quite sure if we touched on with Jerry, while a single strain of carp might have very good attributes in their own right in terms of being good looking fish or scaly fish, whatever, and have decent growth rates in certain environments. Another phrase that you used earlier when Ross has been here for hours, guys, it's not just the few minutes you're going to see on YouTube.
I've been here for years.
Right? But
it's my garden pond, I'm a city.
But we've been picking this brain for hours. One of the phrases which I found very interesting earlier, and I have heard it before, hybrid vigor, right? A single strain left to its own devices is eventually going to peter out, and the gene pool is going to become diluted, and
Well, I mean, I suppose it depends whether that particular strain would be considered diverse to start with. I mean, if a fish they call, I suppose they'd say, I'm not a fish geneticist myself, but I do know of it. Is like if you get an inbreeding depression, or I suppose a dilution of the gene pool, it's not good for any strain. And depends. If you started off with a very small number of individuals at the beginning, that wouldn't be good for the strain in the long term, which has happened with a lot of strains of the extant strains in Ireland, the ones that have been here since the early days. It did appear that in the Lough originally, the Leany fish did have good diversity and so forth. They appeared like we had great diversity in form and shape, and there was I wouldn't have said that with that particular strain, but perhaps with the decoy strain there may be some evidence of that locally. However, as far as I recall from my conversations with Bill, is that the decoy fish in the Lough are quite diverse. Now there's the other component of it is if you cross one strain with another, that obviously you're going to have you may have much greater results. For example, the French fish, which as far as I know came from a number of different strains, and if you cross them with the decoy strain or perhaps Neil Hardy aquatica, you might get a very very you might get some very interesting results, because you'll get the lovely scale pattern, you might get length characteristics or high back. And this is, fish farmers in Europe have kind of selected these characteristics over time. A lot of them haven't been done genetically, but rather by hand. And if you really want to do the best program, you got to test them genetically and choose based on a genetic basis rather than just a physical basis, because it's not quite a simple matter of pick the big ones and leave the smaller ones behind. It's more complex than that, and that's why the advent of genetics is so important in fish. It's very important. So
this is great stuff, man. Really appreciate you taking the time. It's been tremendous, not only an eye-opener, but it filled in a lot of gaps in my knowledge. So listen, thanks for taking the time.
No problem.
To talk to us today.
Not a bother.
Cheers, Ross.
Cheers.
If you have any interest in fishing in the southwest of Ireland, we suggest you check out Ross's guided angling website, leangling.com. The links are in the description box below.